Good morning, students. Based on your responses in the survey yesterday, it's clear that you would like a few more videos to help make sure that you know what I'm expecting you to do. So let's look at this practice assessment that you did yesterday. First, you were given a scenario about feather color. So feather color would be a trait. There are variations in the feather color trait. Sometimes the variations are dark blue, sometimes medium blue, and sometimes white. So the phenotype could be dark blue, medium blue, or white feathers. This color in these bird species depends on a protein that builds up this blue pigment. So proteins are built through the instructions of genes, and the instructions that these genes carry can be slightly different based on the alleles. So in this case, there are two alleles which we will represent using an uppercase and a lowercase letter instead of shapes. So if the instructions or the allele is for a full protein, then the bird will have dark blue feathers. If the allele is for a partial protein or even sometimes no protein, it can result in white feathers. So in this case, if the bird gets two alleles or two copies for the full pigment or the full protein, then the bird will have dark blue feathers. If the bird gets two alleles for the partial protein or no protein, the bird will have white feathers. And if they get one of each, then they will have this medium blue feather. So we scroll down and we see this is an example bird family. Okay, so now our tasks. We're going to write the most likely genotypes for each family member. So remember that genotypes are both of the alleles. In this case, we're going to represent those alleles by letters. The phenotype is what the offspring or the organism will look like. Okay, so the first parent has, I'm just looking right above, medium blue feathers. So what is that genotype likely to be? Well, if it's medium blue, we can assume that there was one allele for the full protein, dark blue, and one allele for the partial protein, which would lead to white. In this case, when there is a copy, one copy of each, it results in something kind of in the middle. So we would say that it has a capital B, lowercase b. This parent has medium blue feathers, so we'll say it has a capital B, lowercase b. By the way, you could do it this way. The order does not matter. Chick 1 has white feathers, so that means it has two partial proteins. So we're going to do a lowercase b and a lowercase b. And then Chick 2 has a medium b and a uppercase b and a lowercase b. So I'm going to insert an image to create this pedigree for the family. So now I've created the pedigree for the male parent and the female parent. We know that the male parent and the female parent both have medium blue feathers, and so therefore we would create a square and a circle that are both half filled in. Notice I also have this line between them that shows that they are a mating pair. And I added the genotype now below each parent. So again, there's a capital B, lowercase b. This represents that this male parent has one copy of each allele. And the female parent has the same, one copy of each allele. Now we're going to add their offspring. Notice that to add the offspring, I have drawn a line down from the mating pair, but because they had siblings, or these parents had two offspring, we're going to make a line that crosses, or rather that's horizontal, And then we're going to have two lines coming down like this. We do not want to draw a line between the offspring, otherwise that would show they were a mating pair. Instead, we're going to draw a line above them and have a couple coming down. We're going to assume that this family has two offspring that are both female. So in our first female offspring, they had a phenotype of white feathers. And in the second female offspring, they had a phenotype of medium blue feathers. So now I'm going to show you how I would write their genotypes. So now with this family pedigree, we see the parents and the offspring. We see their phenotypes as indicated by the shading in of the circles or squares. And we can see their genotypes, or their allele combination that they have for the particular gene, in this case, which we are saying indicates the feather color. So let's see if I can capture my thinking in words down below. So let's look at this in whole. Each bird inherits two sets of chromosomes from their parents. That's the same for cattle, that's the same for humans, that's the same for any organism that reproduces with sexual reproduction. On each pair of chromosomes, there are matching genes. Genes are instructions or recipes to build proteins. Though the genes are matching, they can have slight differences in their recipes. These differences, or variations, are called alleles. Since alleles are the instructions to build proteins, slightly different instructions result in slightly differently shaped proteins. When the proteins are different, because their shape is different, they're going to be not fitting where they need to fit in quite the same way. The visible trait, or the phenotype, will also be different. And this is why we see the variation in feather color. This is also why we see the variation in muscle size and all sorts of other variation that we see when we look at living things. Now, when we get into the claim, evidence, and reasoning, you're going to be thinking about how does feather color of a bird relate to its alleles and proteins. Basically, this is just going to be restating what we said here. So let's see if we can come up with a simple claim. So for example, my claim could be a bird's feather color depends on the alleles it inherits or gets from each parent, which give instructions for how each feather color protein is made. I'd want to give evidence from the text above. For example, I could write, in the bird family, both parents have medium blue feathers, this is their phenotype, and the genotypes of big B, little b, that's how we say that. One chick is white, little b, and the other is medium blue, big B, little b. This shows that different combinations of these alleles, again, big B and little b alleles, cause different feather colors. So alleles are, let's fold this, alleles are versions of a gene that give instructions for making proteins. The big B allele makes a working protein the big B allele makes a working pigment protein or working color protein, while the little b allele makes less or none. So for the reasoning, we might say something like, alleles are versions of a gene that give instructions for making proteins. The big B allele makes a full color protein, while the little b allele makes a partial protein. The completeness of the protein determines how much pigment is in the feathers, which leads to differences in the color or the phenotype. Hopefully, this review has helped you understand how you might answer the questions on this practice assessment. This is very, very similar to what is happening in the cattle with their myostatin gene and the allele for the different completeness of the myostatin protein. The myostatin protein, based on its shape, is a basically stop signal that tells those muscle cells, stop reproducing, stop making more. And if that protein is partial, it doesn't really fit in the lock anymore. So therefore, in the cattle, when they have the allele for this variation in the myostatin protein, their muscles just don't stop growing, and that's why they end up so big. And that's really not a good thing, because it becomes really hard for their bodies to manage. And a lot of times these animals will die early as a result of all of these extra muscle proteins. All right, students, hope this helps.